Thank you all for joining us this evening. As Corelli mentioned, today we are here to review the draft proposal for the enrollment plan for the 23-24 school year. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we're extremely grateful for this opportunity to present this information to you, as well as to take your questions toward the end of our session so that we can help make sure that you clearly understand the proposal as it's being recommended. For context, on September 20th, we presented the draft one to the board during their work session. And during that time, we talked about the proposed school assignment changes for the 23-24 school year, keeping in mind that we don't have any new schools opening for the 23-24 school year. This year's proposal focuses on overcrowded schools, underutilized schools, and we seek opportunities to improve transportation efficiency wherever possible. While the proposal addresses these issues through base assignment changes, it also looks at calendar application changes and includes some generous stability rules. So as a quick reminder for those of you that have logged in, if you joined us a little bit late, this is specifically the session for the Southeastern and Southern areas of the district. What that means is that the primary portion of this presentation will focus on this area of the county, or these two areas of the county. And then toward the end of the session, when we open up for questions and answers, we'll focus on questions specific to this area first. If there's time at the end of the session for additional questions, we certainly can take questions about other areas of the county at that time. But we want to make sure that we give enough time and sufficient focus to these two areas tonight. And so we'll kind of move forward from there. While we're going through our public information sessions tonight, we have one more scheduled for tomorrow. We also have a thought exchange that's open and will stay open through October 7th. Then we'll come back to the board on October 18th to present to them the final recommendations for draft 2. So any revisions that we feel are needed for draft 2 or any responses to any of the questions that came up through the thought exchange or sessions like this. So before we move forward, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Corelli, our host. She has something else to share.
Thank you. I wanted to just let you all know that one of our board members, Ms. Johnson Hostler, has also joined.
Thank you for that, Corelli. What you see on this screen is just some logistical information. As I mentioned, we're going to take questions toward the end of the session. And so if you have any questions during the session, we don't want you to lose track of those. So there's two ways that you can get those questions to us. One is to go ahead and use our thought exchange. We just ask that you use the hashtag session3 so that we can see that that's a question being posted while you're participating in tonight's live session. So if you use hashtag session3, it'll go into the thought exchange, which means not only will we address the question for you here in this session this evening, it'll also be included in the full sum of information that's shared with the board in terms of the public feedback that we've received. If it's not that important to you that it be included in the official record, or if it's just a quick question about technical logistics or something like that, please feel free to use the chat tool as well. The chat will send the questions to our host, and then toward the end of the session, we'll go through any questions that come up through the chat as well. So you've got two avenues. The chat will definitely be reviewed. Just know that it's an unofficial method. We can't necessarily push those into the thought exchange, but anything that you post to the thought exchange with the hashtag session3, we will see and be able to respond to tonight, as well as include in the full sum of public feedback that's been received as we share information with the board at their October 18th work session. So before I move forward, does anybody have any questions or having any difficulty accessing either of these comment or question mechanisms? I believe we're going to go ahead and copy and paste the chat and the session3 hashtag for the thought exchange piece into the chat so that you can quickly access that if you want to go ahead and have it open maybe on a separate tab, so that as you have those questions, you can post them throughout the session. All right, so as we move forward, we always like to start, as you saw the video, for those of you that joined us right on time, that kind of goes through the 4 pillars that lets you know this is the board policy that the district uses to guide our assignment planning process. You'll see that student achievement, stability, proximity, and operational efficiency are those 4 core pillars that guide our work. And while we say that no one of these is more important than the others, and they all work in concert together to come up with a balanced assignment plan, we certainly don't want to take away any importance on the student achievement pillar. That is a primary focus for us, is making sure that all of our schools are high quality schools and that student achievement is being taken into consideration with any recommended changes. And then we use stability, proximity, operational efficiency where it fits, to make further recommendations. At the September 20th work session, when we presented this draft to the board, we also went through a few updates for some background information to kind of help the board see how staff got to the point where they were ready to present draft one. So we'll take a little bit of time to go through those updates tonight so that you can see and hear exactly what the board heard in terms of the preparation that went into draft one. When we get to the enrollment plan recommendations, you'll see an abbreviated version of that. We'll focus again, as I mentioned earlier, just on those recommendations that apply to the southeastern and southern areas of the county. And then we'll talk about our timeline and next steps. Once we've gone through that, then we'll take any questions that you may have. So again, for context, to sort of set the stage, before we started the assignment planning process and brought forward draft one, we took time to engage our community in a thought exchange, asking about the most important factors that make a school a good fit for each person's family. We posted that, and it was open between June 10th and June 29th. And as you can see by this information, we did have a really good turnout and response rate for this particular thought exchange. We had just over 2,800 participants who posted just over 2,500 comments, and those comments acquired a little over 56,000 star ratings. So if you've not used our thought exchange yet, just a quick sort of understanding of how it works. When you log into the thought exchange, you'll get a little bit of information about why we're hosting the thought exchange, and then you get a few instructions on how to participate. The first thing that you're given an opportunity to do is to sort of make a virtual sticky note that has your thought or your comment or your response to the core question. We certainly encourage people to sort of list one thought per virtual sticky note so that each of those thoughts can be looked at individually. And so once families started posting those thoughts and they kind of felt like, okay, I think I've posted enough thoughts to this question. I've gotten, my ideas out there. Then you move into the second portion of the thought exchange, which is rating. And at that point, you get a shuffle of the question or the comments that have already been posted by other users in a random order. You're encouraged to, I believe, rate at least 30 comments. That way, from a statistics perspective, we get a good average rating for all of our comments, and there's a good shuffling and mixture of the comments. So as you go through that process, you're given a range of 1 to 5 stars. So as you see a comment and you think about the question and you think about how that pertains to you and your family, you might think, oh, I really agree with this. This is something that is similar to how I feel about this question. You could maybe give it a 4 or a 5-star rating. If you read the comment and go, this really isn't particularly important to our family, maybe that's a 1 or a 2-star. Or if you're kind of on the fence, the so-so average place, you could maybe give it a 3. So as all those comments are being rated, that's all being tabulated in the background so that we can see those average ratings. Once you've rated several comments and you feel like you've done your job and you've rated, enough comments to kind of help us with our statistical accuracy, then you're also given the opportunity to just explore the thought exchange itself and just really see any thought that's been posted by anyone without the pressure of having to rate it. You can review those different thoughts. I believe there's some tools in there to kind of help you look at thoughts by region, by area. So you've got a lot of exploration options. Once you've completed your look, you can leave the thought exchange, and then you could come back a week later, 2 days later, as long as it's still open, and you can re-engage. So if you wanted to rate some more comments, or if you had a new idea that you wanted to post. So you can go into the thought exchange as often as you'd like, and you can rate as many comments as you'd like. And then at the end of the process, we will analyze all the data, and I'll show you what that sort of looks like. As you can see, the first time we ran this thought exchange, we had 2,800 individuals actually let us know some demographic information about themselves. 97% of those participants identified as parents. We did allow individuals to choose more than one. So for example, if I'm a staff member at a school and I'm also a parent, I might have chosen parent and staff member. If I'm a student who is, really enjoying the process, I might say I'm a student and I'm a community member. So we didn't restrict the number of choices that someone could choose for this particular question. As I mentioned earlier, there's a rating process. So one tool that we have when we're visualizing the data from the thought exchange is this word cloud. And what the word cloud showed us for this particular thought exchange is that those thoughts that contain the word safety, safe, caring, quality, staff, strong, environment, the larger the word, the higher the average star rating. So these would be thoughts that would have received a rating most likely above a 4.0 average. And that's an interesting perspective to look at, is to just to think about those core terms that are really leading into good fit factors. But we found it more helpful to look at the thoughts in terms of themes, not just an individual word, but more of a concept. And I recognize that these words are really small, so I'll talk you through it. Over here on the left, with an average star rating of about 4.2, you had concepts like quality staff and safety being key decision points or key factors for families when saying that this is why a school might be a good fit for our family. There's quality staff at the school and the school is safe. Looking at 4.1, not a statistically significant difference from the first two, you have concepts like education quality, so the actual quality of the courses and the curriculum and so forth. And good communication, that the school is really good about sharing information about what's happening at the school, inviting the parents to come into events, things in that sort of vein. So in that 4.1 to 4.2 average star rating, you have those ideas of a quality staff, quality teachers, quality leaders, a nice, safe, welcoming campus, high valued education, education quality, and good communication. Not far behind, sort of in the middle of the pack here of the not exactly top 10, it's really those that had an energy rating of 3.5 or higher average star rating. The next group here at about a 4.0 is community, proximity, and stability. So when we presented this question without a specific map, we found, not surprisingly, that having a good quality set of teachers and leaders on campus and having good high quality education are really those things that families are looking for first and foremost. It is important that there's a sense of community, that the school is relatively close, and that there is some stability of assignment. Again, none of those are necessarily surprising for us, but it's good to see that that feedback came out and that we were able to gather that from our families. You'll see over here, still nudging in just above a 3.5 average rating. Special education came in at about a 3.8. And then topics like calendar continuity, and diversity within the school came at a 3.7. This final bar represents what we call miscellaneous. And so it just captured all the remaining comments that didn't necessarily fit into one of these categories that had a 3.5 or above star rating. So what did we do with that information? Some of it we just made sure we continued to digest and really reflect on as we were thinking about the 4 pillars and what types of assignment challenges we had before us for the 23-24 school year. Others we really wanted a little bit more information on. So we partnered with our data research and accountability department to conduct some focus groups on 2 core areas. One was the education quality piece. We really wanted to dig into what that means. You could fine to say high quality education, but sometimes it's hard to understand what someone means by that specific statement. So we partnered with data research and accountability, held 3 focus groups. We had a total of 23 participants in those focus groups with a range of 6 to 10 participants per focus group. So while that's a really good rate for focus group participation, and those are good sizes for focus groups, we do have to, be careful not to overgeneralize the results of the focus groups because it does represent a small portion of all of the communities and parents in the district. However, with those focus groups, we did pull away 4 key takeaways. One, clear communication, not just clear communication from the school to parents about what's happening at the school site, but clear communication from the district as to why decisions are being made. How is it that a year-round calendar works? These were just various ideas that came up, is this idea about clear communication. Another concept that came up was related to the year-round calendar. When asked questions about proximity and high growth areas, the participants in these groups generally came to the idea that a change in calendar for a school, let's say from traditional to multi-track year-round when there are crowding issues, might be slightly more favorable to capping the school or reassigning students out of the school. So again, we have to be careful not to overgeneralize these statements, but it was an interesting takeaway from the conversation. And then going into the last 2 comments that you see here, proximate school assignments. We really wanted to dive into what is it about proximity that is so important. And some of the core pieces we pulled out of that is that if you're assigned to a school that's a little bit closer to home, it is easier to participate and be involved in the school as a parent or as a family. And then there's a perceived connection that involvement would relate to improved student achievement. And then the last key takeaway that we had from these focus groups was about strong, educated teachers, that the idea of having strong, educated, highly qualified teachers is part of that concept of a high quality education, and that can be a very significant factor in a family's perception of what is a high quality school. So what did we do with this information? We kind of folded it in with all of the other thoughts that came in from the thought exchange, what we know about our pillars. Part of the reason for these types of virtual public information sessions and continuing to use the thought exchange were to address the clear communication piece. So we're trying to adapt and respond as we get any piece of information from our families. So one of the pieces of that is continuing with our public engagement. On September 20th, we opened up our website. We do thank everybody for being patient as our address lookup tool had a high volume of hits that first night. We have since shored up the background for that so that the next time we go live with our next draft, we should be able to withstand that hit a little bit better. Next, we opened our thought exchange, as I mentioned, and we shared that link earlier. Here's the link again. Reminder, if you have questions today, please use that hashtag session3 so that we can see those and capture those. And then we still have one more public information session. So the one highlighted in pink, that's tonight's session. And then tomorrow night, we'll have one more for the Southwestern and Western areas. Then we'll gather all of that feedback. We'll close our thought exchange this Friday and really start analyzing all of the information that's come in through that particular tool and start preparing any revisions that we might make to draft 2. Another piece of information that we share with the board, particularly when we're thinking about what might trigger the need for an assignment change, as we discussed and reminded our board about the CAP schools in the district. So as you can see here on the left is a list of the elementary schools throughout the district that are currently capped, meaning that if a family moves into the attendance area for this school and presents themselves for enrollment at the school, there is a chance that there's not sufficient space for them in the classes there and that they would be assigned to what we call an overflow school, a somewhat proximate nearby school that will provide transportation to, and the student will go to that school as an alternative since the school that they're assigned to is so overcrowded. We also have a handful of middle schools and high schools in the district that are impacted by these caps as well. And then the last piece of information we reviewed with the board was where we are with our capital improvement plan. So the sort of 7-year outlook for that. And part of the reason for this is to be mindful that if we know a new school is coming online in an area, we want to be mindful that any recommendations we make this year won't necessarily be impacted again 1 or 2 or 3 years from now when one of those new schools opens up. And so that'll be impactful for our discussion tonight as well as tomorrow. What you'll see here in this particular list is these in orange just kind of give us a look back as to schools that have recently opened. So in your community, Willow Spring High School opened up in 21-22, which means in that first year, it serves 9th and 10th graders. Now that we're in the 22-23 school year, it is serving 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. In this particular school year, when we opened up 3 new schools: Barton Pond Elementary, Apex Friendship Elementary, and Herbert Akins Road Middle School, which is in your community as well. And so the openings of those schools had impacts on assignment. The next school projected to open as a new school site is Woods Creek Elementary School. And you can see here that it's projected to open in 2024-25. You'll see here shaded in gray, Bauckham Elementary. Because there is a renovation scheduled for Bauckham Elementary and the Woods Creek site will actually be ready for occupancy sometime this school year, we're going to use it as what we call a swing space. So the students at Bauckham Elementary will move over to the site where Woods Creek Elementary is and take up temporary residence there while their school is being renovated. Once the renovation is complete, they'll move back onto their original campus where Bauckham is currently located, and then Woods Creek will be refreshed and ready for its own school population. So we'll need an attendance area for that school in 24-25. You'll notice in 25-26, there are several additional new schools projected to open. Hilltop Needmore, which is in this region, Rex Road in this region, Bowling Road in this region. And then you've got Felton Grove, sort of in this region, more of a southwestern area, Pleasant Plains, more of the southwestern western area, and then Parkside Middle, more of the northwestern area. So all of these schools are projected to open in 25-26. So we did want to be mindful, particularly in this region, about the multiple school sites that are projected to open in 25-26 as we thought about how to handle some of the schools in your area that are already experiencing high growth. And last but not least, in 27-28, we do have an as yet unnamed high school opening in the Morrisville area, and that will have some impacts for high schools on that side of the county as well. We always want to note that due to market volatility, we have to be cautious that these schedules can change. But for right now, these are the projections that we're working with in terms of target open dates. Whew, all right. So thinking about all of that and thinking about what's happening on the ground in all of the areas of the county, we came up with some recommendations, and there are some that are specific to this region. So again, if you have questions or thoughts, please use the chat tool or our thought exchange and just use that hashtag session3. I already see that at least 1 or 2 questions are coming in on the thought exchange. So thank you for using that hashtag. It makes it easy for us to see those comments. So specific to the Southeastern and Southern area, the base assignment changes that are going to be recommended, we'll talk about in just a moment, but I did want to give you a quick overview of what's happening across the district. So right now in the current proposal, what you're seeing with this map in the sort of shaded in areas are the areas that are recommended to be impacted by these assignment changes as a base assignment change. The list of schools on the left represents the schools that would be sending students to a different school, and the receiving schools is the list of the existing schools that would be receiving those new students. So you can see there's a bit of a distribution throughout the county with these recommendations. Similarly, a quick overview of what we're recommending at the middle school level, a little bit shorter list, but you have these middle schools projected to send students out, these middle schools projected to receive students, and you can kind of see the distribution. And of course, there's one in this particular area that is of significance. And then looking at the high school areas, there are a handful of high schools being recommended to send students to a different school, and then similarly, a handful of high schools recommended to receive those new students. And you can kind of see the distribution here. It's in 2 core areas, none that impact your area this time. I thought it would be wise to talk about the stability rules before we show you the recommendations. I'm sure most of you have had an opportunity to at least review the recommendations, maybe even just by using our address lookup tool, but we do want to talk about them in a little bit greater detail, at a holistic level. So before I do that, we do want to talk about the stability rules. This particular assignment plan for 23-24 does not involve the opening of any new schools. And so staff thought it would be advisable to thinking about what we heard in the original thought exchange back in June and other feedback we've received throughout the years about the importance of stability of assignment. We thought it would be wise to make a recommendation that all existing students, regardless of grade level, would have that opportunity to request a stability transfer and remain at their existing school site, such that new students to the area or rising kindergarten, 6th or 9th grade students who don't have an older sibling would be starting that process of moving over to the new school assignment. You'll see that there is a piece here about the rising kindergarten, 6th and 9th grade siblings. We also thought it, again, just for this year, that to provide a little bit more stability for families, that if they chose to stay and had a rising kindergarten, 6th or 9th grade sibling, that student be able to join their older sibling at that school. So again, we always have to caveat the recommendation is specific to this year's plan because we're not opening any new schools. We can't promise that we can be this generous in future years, but this is the current recommendation, and it seems to have some support. The other note we have here is as we get through draft 2 and we make that presentation to the board on October 18th, we will then start directly following up with families that are included in the proposal to give them some more specific information about how they'll access the stability transfer process and how they can let us know that they'd like to stay. Keep in mind, the board will not approve any recommended changes until November 15th. So we really can't physically take action until a final approval is in place. But we did want to start working with families to give them a heads up about how the process will work as early as the release of draft 2 so they could start thinking about their timelines and how to access those processes. So keeping that in mind, generous stability rules, existing students can remain at the school without transportation, of course, but still have that option. We're going to start with our recommendations related to Bryan Road Elementary. As you may be aware, Bryan Road Elementary is in an area that's experiencing high rates of growth, and the school is currently crowded today, and the crowding is projected to only get more significant in the coming years. So we've identified a couple of areas that we would like to recommend moving to Aversboro Elementary. You'll see there's an area here that's aligned to Benson Road or Benson Highway. And then you can see a section down here. This is Benson and maybe a little bit of Cleveland School Road kind of going in this direction. The recommendation would be to assign these areas to adjoin with this adjacent attendance area already assigned to Aversboro, and then go on up and attend Aversboro Elementary. The recommendation is being made based on the available capacity at Aversboro, the overcrowding at Bryan Road, and for that long range continuity of assignment. As I mentioned, in this particular area, there are 3 elementary schools opening up over time, one of which is Hilltop Needmore, which is sort of in this general area, and one is Bowling Road, which we'll kind of see a little bit better on a different map. So we know that this portion of the attendance area that we're recommending remain assigned to Bryan Road for the time being will most likely be impacted by the opening of Hilltop Needmore. So we didn't want to move it twice, in a very short order. And so the recommendation is that this be a longstanding and continuing enrollment area for Aversboro Elementary. The next slide will show you what the impacts to crowding are. So just to kind of orient you, this top portion of the slide represents if we do nothing. So if we make no changes, Aversboro will continue to be what we call underutilized at about a 61% fill rate, where Bryan Road will continue to grow beyond 110% in just a few short years. So the recommendation that we've proposed would make a difference in the sense that we could take advantage of some of that available capacity at Aversboro Elementary, as well as relieving a little bit of pressure at Bryan Road to get us to that point where those new schools will be opening in 25, 26. And then we can address that southern area at that time and maybe provide some continuous and final relief to Bryan Road. Another elementary school in the area that we're making some recommendations for is South Lakes Elementary. So the greenish colored area here represents the current South Lakes attendance area, and the purplish areas, the 2 pieces here, represent the current attendance area for Fuquay-Varina Elementary. We do recognize that South Lakes is one of our newer schools. It's in its 3rd year of operations. So families assigned to South Lakes have been there for a maximum of 3 years. And we recognize that. Again, part of why we wanted to recommend really generous stability rules this year. But there is significant growth in the South Lakes base attendance area, specifically around the school site, as well as this area in the southern region. So we are recommending permanent reassignment relief by taking this portion west of 55 that's continuous with an existing subdivision here. So it's just it's a continuation of that existing subdivision, and having it join into that assignment area and be assigned to Fuquay-Varina Elementary, as well as some of these attendance areas here on the southern edge of the existing portion of the Fuquay-Varina Elementary base. These we do perceive and plan to be able to stay at Fuquay-Varina long term, because over here, right in this general area, is the future site of the Bowling Road Elementary School that I talked about earlier, that's projected to open in 25, 26. So we're confident that this portion of the South Lake base, as well as this piece of the Fuquay-Varina Elementary base over time, will be impacted by the opening of that school. And so we were hesitant to do any more reassignments out of South Lakes in this coming school year, knowing that when that school opens, it will provide some impacts to this area. So the resulting map would look a little bit like this, just a little bit larger attendance area for Fuquay-Varina Elementary, a little bit smaller for South Lakes. And as we go to the next slide, we can see that projected impact. So Fuquay-Varina Elementary is currently at 84%, so it has sufficient capacity to absorb some new students in its attendance area. South Lakes Elementary School going into next year is already projected to be well over 110% crowded, as it's quite crowded today, and that growth will only continue to put pressure on the school. With this recommendation, as well as one more that I'm going to show you in the next few slides, this takes advantage of some of that capacity at Fuquay-Varina Elementary, as well as relieve some pressure for South Lakes so that we can get to that 25-26 school year when Bowling Road is scheduled to open up, and provide that needed relief as this area continues to grow over time. You'll see that there's a note that it's impacted by other assignment adjustments. So let's look at those now. Again, this green area represents the existing South Lakes Elementary base attendance area, and this is an area on the northern edge of South Lakes Elementary along Highway 42. The neighborhoods in this particular area currently exit onto NC 42, and so we're recommending that they be assigned to Willow Springs. And this is an area where I'm fairly certain they were originally assigned to Willow Springs, got assigned to South Lakes, and have been there for the 3 years, and we're projecting to assign that area back to Willow Springs. And so we recognize that. Again, that's why we're proposing those very generous stability rules to account for that type of turbulence for a particular family. And so by taking that piece out, that is that final relief to South Lakes to give it that long-term sustainability. So it takes advantage of some available capacity at Willow Springs Elementary. As you can see, it gets it a little bit more full, as well as that combined effort provides that relief for South Lakes that we're looking for to help it, move into the time period where a new school will be opening in the area. All right. So then the last move in your area that's being recommended is pretty significant. We recognize that. It's looking at taking the current attendance area that matches Willow Springs Elementary School, which is a multi-track year-round school, and assigning it to Herbert Akins Middle School or Herbert Akins Road Middle School. We recognize that this assignment isn't necessarily closer for these families, but it does take advantage of some capacity that's available at Herbert Akins Road Middle. And because of the growth that's continuing on this western edge of this region, we know that that relief will be needed long term as Fuquay-Varina Middle School moves to its new site over time. So there's a lot going on with this particular recommendation. First, Fuquay-Varina Middle School as a traditional calendar has a capacity of around 936 right now in its existing site. And it's going to be there for another year or so based on, projected construction schedules. It's currently experiencing the same type of growth that we were seeing in the South Lakes Elementary School base. And so its crowding level is very severe at this point in time. And so we're trying to find a way to relieve that crowding now and in the long term, and to recognize that as growth continues in this portion of the county, we'll most likely need to expand the Fuquay-Varina Middle School base attendance area west to support the growth in that area. So our recommendation is to take this portion, Willow Springs Elementary School base attendance area, from Fuquay-Varina Middle to Herbert Akins Road Middle, largely based on the calendar match, as well as, most importantly, the capacity availability. So let me show you those numbers. So if we don't make any adjustments to the Fuquay-Varina middle base going into next year, they're scheduled to be at over 130 or just at 130% crowded. That's an unsustainable level of crowding for any of our schools. And so we do need to have some way to relieve that crowding. Herbert Akins Road Middle, with its full brand new facility and its full capacity on all 4 tracks, is a little over 1,200. And so it has sufficient space to absorb the attendance area coming out of Willow Springs. Again, recognizing this is a big shift and a big change, those generous stability rules kick in. We do acknowledge that transportation can't be provided with those stability transfers, but we're trying to find that middle ground where we can allow families to have some stability if they can make the carpool situation work, while we're migrating over to this more fully implemented plan with some calendar alignment and some capacity alignment. As you can see here, by making this recommended change, this presumes that everybody moves in the first year. So we recognize that not all families will move, but there is sufficient capacity at Herbert Akins Road Middle to take on the families that are in the Willow Springs Elementary base attendance area. And that does provide the needed relief for Fuquay-Varina while we wait for it to move to its new campus with its larger capacity. And then we can evaluate it at that time for an additional attendance area. And so with that kind of covers the base attendance area changes for the Southeast and Southern regions that are being recommended. Another series of recommendations that are being made to help with some crowding issues, but also to help with transportation efficiency mainly, are some calendar application changes. So for those of you who may not have exercised this option before, many of our addresses have a base assignment. Well, all of our addresses have a base assignment. Let me correct that. And then many have something called a calendar application school associated with their address as well. So in the case of the slide we were just looking at, if I'm base assigned at Fuquay-Varina Middle School, which is on the traditional calendar, there's most likely a year-round middle school that I could apply to as a family if I'd like to have the year-round calendar, either for continuity coming out of Willow Springs Elementary or just because we prefer that calendar. And when the district approves those applications, we also provide transportation to those options. And so over time, it's gotten a little bit clunky. So looking at, let's say, Ballantyne as an example. So Ballantyne Elementary currently sees up to 2 choices per address. So my one address might see both Fuquay-Varina and Lincoln Heights as traditional options. And so we're recommending to streamline that for transportation efficiency purposes and to deal with some crowding at Lincoln Heights, to reduce that to just the one choice of Fuquay-Varina Elementary. and because Valentine is a multi-track year-round school. In other areas, you might actually see the term NA show up as the proposed calendar application school. So what that means is for that area, what we're saying is if the family wants that other calendar, they're still welcome to ask for that during the transfer process, and staff will evaluate those. And if there's space available and all those things that we would normally look at, we can certainly approve those transfers. However, if we are able to approve the transfer, it would not come with district transportation. So that would be the small change there. So families would still have the ability to ask for and access potentially those schools with the other calendars based on seat availability and all of those sorts of factors. However, the district would no longer provide transportation to those options. In many of the cases that we're looking at here, very few families are currently exercising the option, or it is creating a transportation inefficiency, and we're looking for those ways to improve our ride times and to help with reducing the total number of routes transportation needs to run. So here you see the list of elementary schools listed A through Hilburn, or Aversboro through Hilburn. Here I accidentally put Hilburn up there again, so it's really Hunter through Salem. And you can see some changes here. I'll let that sit. This entire slide deck is posted to our website as well as the board materials because it was a presentation that was given on September 20th. So you're welcome to go review those at any point in time if you want to see the full presentation. And then this is the last of the elementary schools, starting with Southeast Raleigh and going through Willow Springs Elementary. Similarly, when we're making these same types of recommendations at the middle school and high school level. So I don't think any of these are in your particular area, but you can see the impact here as well. And again, that NA simply means that district transportation won't be provided to those options anymore. It doesn't mean that the families can't necessarily request them. We've already talked about the stability rules. I think I've talked about them ad nauseum, but one more time, just for good measure, because of the changes that are being recommended here, because of what we know is happening in a couple of years from now with new schools opening, and because we recognize that this particular year there aren't new schools opening, we are recommending very generous stability rules that expand what policy already allows for. So just for a point of information, policy standard is that if it's an existing high school to an existing high school, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders would be able to remain. We're adding in that those rising ninth grade siblings can join them. By policy, it's a little bit more restrictive at the elementary and middle school levels. Usually it's 5th or 8th grade only that can remain. And so we're expanding that to say all existing students that are continuing in the school, if they'd like to stay, they're welcome to. We're just going to not be able to provide transportation to that school anymore. And again, we'll talk about those details with our families as we get closer to the impact date. So timeline and next steps. Here we are in this sort of September, October timeframe. We've presented to the board on September 20th. We're in the throes of our public engagement activities, and then we'll continue to refine the draft to prepare draft 2. On October 18th, we'll prepare and present that draft 2, and all we'll talk about really is anything that we're recommending changing based on the feedback we've received from sessions like this, as well as the thought exchange. And we've also been attending a handful of board advisory council meetings and getting feedback from those as well. Once that presentation is made, we'll open up another thought exchange so people can respond to any of the changes that are included in draft 2. We'll schedule another public information session to make sure we can address any questions people might have about those changes in draft 2. And then we'll prepare a final draft. The goal is to have a final draft to the board by November 15th. So before we do that, we want to allow the board to have that one last opportunity to have a true traditional public hearing. So on November 10th, the board will have a public hearing. It is intentionally not on a Tuesday, it's on a Thursday, to make sure that its focus is solely on the student assignment plan. That way they can get really good feedback, good comments, good information about the public's thoughts and ideas and questions and concerns about the assignment plan. And then any revisions that need to be made will be made during the work session on November 15th. And then we'll bring the final proposal to the board during their actual business portion of their meeting that same night. One more reminder about where we are in this round of public engagement. We have one more session tomorrow night. So if you have any friends, families, neighbors, etc., that you think would benefit from this type of a session, please encourage them to join us tomorrow night. It is our last information session for this round. Also, please continue to use our thought exchange. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it back over to our host and remind you all that if you did have questions throughout the session, please post those to our chat if you have them. Ideally, personally, I'd love for you to put them in the thought exchange with the session 3 hashtag. That way it gets built into our larger set of feedback. But I'll take a sip of water and let Corelli tell us where we are with questions from today's session.
Okay, Ms. Pulliam. Someone is asking why there is not a middle school, a new middle school being built in Garner.
So a lot of that has to do, so the question about a new middle school in the Garner area. I believe there is still some land available near Bryan Road Elementary that could accommodate a middle school. As of right now, because of the available seats at schools like Westlake, Herbert Akins, and then as Fuquay moves into its new site, the projections really aren't showing us that we're going to need a large number of new seats, but we are keeping an eye on that because we have noticed that North Garner and East Garner are getting full as well. And so that is on our radar, but as of right now, there is just not one that's in the capital improvement plan that's scheduled to open in the next 7 years. It's probably a little farther out in the capital improvement plan.
We have one question on Thought Exchange. Why was the first public Thought Exchange posted during the summer only?
Right. So you may not know about me, but I joined the staff in March. And so by the time I had an opportunity to get before the board in May and let them know that we were starting to plan and that we wanted to use some sort of a public engagement session prior to the start of the assignment planning process, the window that I had to work with was pretty much June. And at that time, the strategic plan had been successfully using the Thought Exchange as a tool. So we decided that that would be a good tool for our families to use. But I agree, we want to have these conversations early and often. So looking forward to next year and the year after, as particularly with the number of new schools that'll be opening, we are looking to have more engagement in the spring months as well. So thank you for asking that. That was not intentional. It's just sort of where we were with the timeline that we had this year.
I see some coming in the chat. Just let me copy them over so I can read it.
Okay.
And Ms. Pulliam, I just wanted to add,
Oh, sure.
Garner, this
Just
is
so everyone
Glenn
knows who's
Carrozza.
talking. That's Mr. Carrozza.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to add, as part of our capital improvement plan, North Garner Middle School will be going through a renovation, which will increase its capacity as well. So that will give us additional seats in the area.
Thank you for that added piece. I did neglect to mention that that is our renovation sites are not listed in that slide that we have for the board, but our renovations almost always come with additional capacity. So there is additional capacity coming to that area.
We have one more question. We appreciate the generous stability rules offered this time. We were not giving that option last time when we were redistricted, and this happened 5 to 6 years ago. So that being swirled around is quite often and is upsetting. Also would like to know why there is not a STEM middle school option in our area.
So first, thank you for appreciating the stability rules. That's good affirming feedback to know that we should move forward with that recommendation. And as a district, it feels like every time we think we've gotten caught up with the growth passes beyond us. Something that came up in the video that I'm not sure everybody is always aware of is that in our county, and I think it may even be within the state, but certainly within our county, there is no responsibility to developers for setting aside land to support the school system. I know I grew up in a different region, and in that region, if a developer was proposing X number of units, then they also had to set aside land for schools to be built to support those new properties. So that was a way that that area managed growth. Our district doesn't have any such rules in place. And so when a developer comes forward and develops land, we then are on our own devices to try to find land to support that growth if we can build a new school. And so it's not the perfect situation, but it kind of It is what we have. And so while we work really, really hard to try to keep people in stable school assignments as much as possible, in some regions of our county, particularly over the last 10 to 20 years, it's just not been possible. But we're working toward that every day to try to keep stable assignments where possible. With respect to the STEM middle school, I'm going to defer to Mr. Carrozza because that falls a little bit more, I think, into the magnet category, and that is one of his supervision areas as well.
Thank you for sharing that. That's good feedback for the magnet office to have at their hand. I know as they continue to look at different programming around the county, they look at where there's desire for certain programming, so we can certainly share that feedback with them, and they can use that as they consider programs moving forward.
A follow-up question. I would like to confirm that my child currently in 2nd grade can stay at their current school until they graduate under the stability plan.
Yes. So for this particular year, if we're making a recommendation, since we talked about, let's say South Lakes to Fuquay-Varina, let's say that's your situation. So if you're currently attending South Lakes and you express an interest in the stability transfer and you request that, then that transfer will be approved through the 5th grade. Then as they move on to 6th grade, they would default to whatever the base assigned school is for your area for 6th grade, unless you choose to apply for a magnet or submit a transfer for something else.
Would it be possible to add transportation for those in their last year at their current schools? My child would then need to transfer in her last year of elementary and then again shift to a new middle school in a different town altogether.
The current stability rules do not conceive of adding any additional transportation moving forward, but we certainly can take that feedback and share it. Our concern right now, as you may be aware, is that transportation has several challenges they're trying to overcome, and any additional routes that we add to the system is a burden they're having a challenge supporting. Glenn, did you want to talk to that point additionally, or do you think that covers the basic concept?
No, I think you did a good job of covering it. As you can see in this plan, many of the recommendations are trying to support the transportation department and the concerns that they're having in meeting the need of all students. So yes, we can certainly continue to look at that, but considering the situation that transportation is in, it's not very likely that we would make that final recommendation to add transportation for stability rules.
This one is from Thought Exchange. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask if we had additional questions.
This one is from Thought Exchange. And it may be that we may need to reach out to this person, or maybe this person can email you, Susan. Would my
Okay.
son, as a rising 6th grader, be eligible for the stability rule if my daughter, a rising 9th grader, is at WSHS?
Willow Spring High School.
He needs to stay at Fuquay Middle. I need to have them on the same schedule in the same area, and that is very important. I can provide
If I
I can
understand,
provide transportation.
Okay. So if I understand the concept of the question, it's that the students are just far enough apart that you probably have an 8th grader this year that will be going into the 9th grade, and then you have a rising 6th grader. So the way the stability rules are written, that technically is outside the scope of what they're intended to do. So because they're a rising 6th grader without a rising 8th grader to attach to, unfortunately, the blanket stability rules would not apply in that situation. That wouldn't preclude you from participating in a regular transfer request and asking for that. But our ability to sort of say that that's part of the stability rules, that would be an unfair statement. And I don't want to mislead you there. So that would not fit within the stability rules as they're currently working and have worked over time.
Would it be possible to, I'm sorry,
You're good.
wrong one. My daughter will be an 8th grader at Fuquay Middle, and her brother will be a future 6th grader next year. Does that mean that they both can stay at Fuquay, or my daughter will get to stay at Fuquay and my son will have to go to Herbert Akins?
So if I'm going to use my fingers again. So if you have the rising 8th grader and a rising 6th grader that will attend the school at the same time, then yes, both would be eligible for the stability transfer under these generous rules this year, because the rising 8th grader would get to stay based on their own merits by being an existing student, and the rising 6th grader would get to join them. And that's a little bit different from the previous parents' question, because that other student will actually be leaving the school and going on to 9th grade. And so that creates that gap where they're not actually at the same school. And then the way that they're currently written, the 6th grader would be allowed to remain, again, without transportation through the end of their 8th grade, and then move on to whatever their basis school is for high school.
If you have any other questions, just drop them in the chat.
I really do appreciate the specific questions. And I think Corrali's going to post my email address to the chat, just in case you have something that's very specific to your family that's, you know, more personal and private that we shouldn't address in a public forum. You're certainly welcome to ask me those questions. If you want to share with me any questions or thoughts or ideas you have about the draft, you can do that as well. I just always encourage you to duplicate that and put that in the thought exchange to make sure it gets put in with all of the comments and thoughts that will be shared with the board when we do our analysis of the total engagement and feedback that's been received. Since we have had sufficient time, I think, to answer questions about this area, does anybody have any questions about other areas that weren't presented tonight? We certainly have some time to address those if there are additional questions about other areas.
Few more questions. Where are the North Garner Middle School students moving during the construction?
Mr. Crows, I believe it's scheduled to be done on site, meaning they'll have some sort of an on-site plan where the students will still be on their same campus while a portion's being constructed and then shift and then construct kind of thing. Is that correct?
I believe that to be the initial plan, but it hasn't been confirmed for sure as of yet.
And so as that's sort of a good sort of segue into just how the capital improvement plan works. We start with design and feasibility studies and so forth and so on. So as we get a little bit closer to the start date for that renovation project at North Garner, very specific information will be shared with families and of course the principal of the school so that they can know what to expect during that construction period. If there is a need to put the students at a different site, they'll identify that site and they'll share that with families as we get a little bit closer. But right now, the initial plan was to try to make use of some space that's on the campus and to let students just continue to come to that site while the constructions may be happening over here while they're taking classes over here kind of thing. And I taught at a school that went through one of those and it can be very manageable as long as everyone follows the rules and we have a good communication plan.
Why is there not a plan for a middle school in the Willow Springs area?
So the short answer is the expanded capacity that's going to be available at Fuquay-Varina Middle over time and the expanded capacity that's now available at Herbert Akins is really meeting the needs at the middle school level as a sum total. In addition, there is still some available capacity at Westlake Middle, which is, I know, a little bit more north, but that kind of helps to relieve some of the pressure throughout the area. I don't believe that there is any land acquired. Glenn, I'm speaking out of turn here a little bit. I'm not sure that there is a site or any land that was contemplating a middle school in the Willow Spring area.
Based on the data that we've gotten back from municipalities over the last several years, we are not projecting the need for an additional middle school outside of Herbert Akins and the increased capacity at Fuquay that we've already planned for.
Already under construction, yeah. I did receive some questions about the expected completion date for Fuquay-Varina Middle through the thought exchange earlier today. Do we have that, or is that something that the capital improvement team will need to share?
Just to repeat that, you said the expected completion date for Fuquay Middle School.
The renovation / new build for the Fuquay-Varina Middle School's new site?
As of right now, it's scheduled to open for the 24-25 school year at the new site.
Okay. And again, we always put our asterisk due to market volatility. We've got to be careful with anything, but right now the projected open date would be for the 24-25 school year. And I did get several questions about that on the thought exchange before tonight.
We have a few more.
Okay.
In regards to Fuquay Middle, Herbert Akins, why not move incoming 6th and 7th graders and leave the 8th graders alone?
Essentially, that's what we're recommending with the stability rules. The The piece that's missing there, of course, would be the transportation. And so the idea is that we allow families that would like to stay at Fuquay-Varina Middle 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. So I shouldn't say 6th, but rising 7th or rising 8th grade. And then if they have an incoming 6th grade sibling, they could join them as well. So really, it's just the rising 6th grade students that don't have an older sibling that would be assigned to Herbert Akins Road Middle if this gets approved as presented. And then the 7th and 8th grade students, it would be a choice. They could choose to stay at Fuquay-Varina Middle without transportation, or they could accept the new assignment to Herbert Akins Road Middle with transportation.
How does parental input ultimately influence these drafts?
Amazing. Wonderful, perfect question, because why do these sessions if there's no impact? So part of what it does is it lets us give the board a perspective so that they can, beyond what they hear themselves, that gives them all of the insights into how parents are responding to the recommendations and the changes. It might reshape our stability rules. In some cases, it might reshape the full draft in terms of, what all stays, remain, and included in it. It's a little early for us to say yet what we're going to change for draft 2 because we still have another public information session and the thought exchange runs through Friday. But we will have some recommendations and some changes to recommend as we get to October 18th based on the feedback that we're receiving. Additionally, there's some feedback that we're receiving, believe it or not, where people wanted to have an assignment change that didn't happen. And so we'll take that type of feedback and bank that for future years as well so that we can take that into consideration for future assignment plans where it's appropriate and feasible.
This is a South Lakes question. So my 2 boys will be able to stay at South Lakes even though they will be rising 4th and 2nd graders. I do provide my own transportation. Will I have to request a stability transfer? Does Kim Short have to approve the request, or will it be approved since I provide my transportation?
That's a wonderful series of questions in one question. So yes, if you have an existing 2nd and 4th grade student that are already attending South Lakes Elementary and you're in one of the areas that's projected to be reassigned to a different school, either Willow Springs Elementary or Fuquay-Varina Elementary. If you submit the stability transfer, it's a central office process. So and again, we'll give those specific details after draft 2 is released. But you would basically go online, type in your information, submit your request, it comes in, and then we would approve that. Those are no transfers in our district ever are based on principal approval. All of our transfers are handled through the central office. While we certainly may, not in this case, in a hardship case, ask, what's going on at a particular school site. For stability transfers, they're 100% based on the rules. So in this case, you're an existing 2nd and 4th grade student. You're wanting to stay for 5th grade and 3rd grade, and then obviously for your younger one all the way through 5th grade, we would approve that. And we would say that you have transfer status from that point moving forward, which means you keep that assignment through 5th grade, sort of regardless of what happens to your assignment in the future. But just to reiterate, principals are not involved in the transfer process. That's all based on policy and rules.
A few more. Will the kids that are moved from Fuquay Middle have the option to return to Fuquay Middle when the new school opens in 2024?
A little hard to predict that in terms of will it become their base assigned school again? No, we would not do that. We would not want to reassign and reassign. Would it be available as an option for transfer request? The catch there is every school in the district, you can always request a transfer to. And then we encourage you to give us your specific reasons why you're asking for that. And then we evaluate that under certain pillars and policy and legal guidance as to when we should or can't approve a transfer. The likelihood that many transfers would be approved into Fuquay-Varina Middle when it moves into its new site is probably pretty low because we'll most likely be expanding its attendance area at the same time. So it's kind of hard for me to say yes or no on that one, but you certainly would have the option to request that transfer, and staff would evaluate it under the current policy and guidelines to determine if it could be approved. So it's I don't really know. To be honest, that's a hard question to answer this far out.
We're moving from a traditional to year-round. How will the tracks be assigned? Will they match their younger siblings that are in year-round?
Excellent question there as well. Generally speaking, as our students go from elementary school to middle school, particularly if they're already on, as you mentioned, you've got a sibling that's already on a track, the principals work together between the two schools to ensure track matching. And so wherever possible, they try to keep you on the track that you've been on. If they can't keep you on the track that you've been on as a family, then they work with you to determine what the best option would be to keep you together on the same track moving forward.
South Lakes doesn't allow pedestrians. Will the board be changing that if transportation is not provided?
I'm going to actually let Mr. Croza take that because he's been working with some of our municipalities on what's going on with walk zones and so forth. But the first piece of that is, as a district, we do identify what we consider safe walk zones for each school. And for example, if you have to cross a 4-lane highway, even if it's got a pedestrian signal, we wouldn't consider that a safe walk zone for a school site. So we would not necessarily say that that's okay, that we would encourage families to use that. But I know that there's a lot of dialogue happening right now about when it is appropriate to walk to school, particularly if a parent is with the student. And I know that Mr. Cruz has been doing some research with our municipalities in terms of increasing crosswalks and sidewalks and so forth. So he may want to chime in on this question as well.
And do you mind just repeating the question to make sure I answer it properly?
Sure. It's just that some areas, particularly for South Lakes, are not allowing for pedestrians. And so is there any effort being made to increase the sort of walk zone for the school?
Okay. So just to clarify something, Wake County Schools does not create walk zones. We have no transport zones.
There we go. Thank you for clarifying that.
So for transportation, the state law says that within 1.5 miles of the school, we do not need to provide transportation. However, we have taken that to another level and looked for safe, viable pathways for students to get to school, and then turn those into no transport zones. So they would not receive bus transportation in those areas. Beyond that, now families may choose to allow their children to walk or bike to school, whereas they still get bus service to their home. We are working on a policy for consistency amongst all school principals about how they deal with allowing walkers or bikers to and from campus. And we plan to have that hopefully soon, so that we can have a consistent message across all our schools about who's eligible to walk or bike to school per parent request.
Thank you for those clarifications. And I apologize for misspeaking at the beginning of my comment.
Could transportation be considered if you have a rising 8th grader and an older sibling on a different calendar?
I'm not sure that I understand the question fully, so if there's any clarification that can be added, that would be helpful. But if I'm hearing the question correctly, it's saying that if I have a rising 8th grader that's impacted by the assignment plan and the older sibling in the family obviously is in the high school level, so maybe or yeah, because you said 8th grader, would maybe be traditional and the middle school student would be year round, could they somehow get transportation? Um, Again, all of that is going to be based on what transportation is available through the assignments that are given. So that's a very murky answer. Let me try that again. Your base assigned school for your address would be the school that would come with transportation. If you choose to, let's say, use the stability rules and stay at a school that is being reassigned, then you would be responsible for the transportation. So based on some conversation we had earlier in tonight's session, the impacts on transportation are significant right now. And so we really don't want to overpromise on the transportation front. We're really trying to make moves to help provide some relief to our transportation department so that they can manage the routes that they already have.
Will Fuquay Middle issue walker passes to students with no transportation?
So I think that's probably just a carry on to Glenn's earlier comments. As a district, we're working together to come up with some policies that can be consistently applied across all schools. So whatever the outcome of that policy work is, will determine how that works. Is it a matter of the student has a walker pass, so they're known that it's approved? The school district is still working on finalizing the details to make that a more streamlined effort across the entire district. So I can't really answer that question specifically right now, but there'll be an answer to that soon.
Is WCPSS a state or county organization?
So Wake County Public Schools is an entity of the school board for Wake County, and its boundaries are the county lines. So it's somewhat affiliated with the county. However, it is separate from the county commissioners. The county commissioners is a different governing body that governs the activities of Wake County, and they have the taxable authority and so forth, which is, so they supply extra funds and resources to our district every year, in addition to what we receive from the state. But as a governing body, Wake County Public School System is governed by the Wake County Board of Education that has jurisdiction just for this district. And then the Wake County Commissioners is a separate governing body that has authority over the policies at the county level from a more government perspective.
Why would Parton Place community, which is located behind South Lakes within walking distance in 1 mile, be changed to Willow Springs?
So I think this is one of the communities that by roadway, the families have to go out to 42 in order to get to the school. And I think this gets back to that walking conversation. So right now, there is not a specific designated path for some of these neighborhoods to walk to campus. And so the recommendation is to have those areas assigned to Willow Springs Elementary, mostly for efficiency of capacity utilization to provide some relief to South Lakes Elementary School from a capacity perspective. In addition, because the buses are going to have to go on to 42 anyway, that's part of that recommendation, so that any transportation that would need to be provided could be sort of quickly and efficiently delivered to Willow Springs Elementary. That being said, if you are choosing to use the stability transfer and based on the work that's being done with the policy regarding walking, there may be options for you for your family to continue to attend the school and be able to walk long term.
Is there a punishment for pedestrians who walk to school that doesn't allow pedestrian access?
That one's a little outside of my scope. Mr. Carozza, do you have any
I'm not
knowledge about
sure.
that question?
Punishment coming from the school system? I'm not quite clear on that. I know, parents can choose whatever method they want to get their children to school. I know as part of the recent conversations that we're looking at for policy is to try to clarify for all principals what is the acceptable process for allowing students to walk or bike to school, to and from school. So I think that may fall under that particular umbrella as well. But if not, just whoever asked that question, please reach out to either Susan or I directly, and we'll be more than happy to answer it.
I know I offered it up earlier, but if anybody has any questions about other areas of the district, we're certainly happy to answer those as well, or continue to take questions about this region.
Just let us know if you have any more questions in the chat. I'm also checking Thought Exchange now to see if I find any questions.
And if I might say, thank you so much for being so engaged tonight. This has been a really rich, if I can't say conversation because I'm the only one talking, but I feel like we've had a good dialogue in terms of the types of questions that are coming forward and our ability to at least shed some light. Well, I recognize that sometimes the answers we provide aren't the ones you're hoping for. Hopefully they at least provide some clarity as to how the plan would work as currently drafted and how we're going to continue to use the feedback you're providing to make projected recommendations for draft 2.
Someone asked, are these questions and answers going to be published somewhere?
So if they're in the thought exchange, yes. And some of these questions we will probably modify into our FAQ document that's already posted on our website. So those are the two ways you might see these. If you've just posted a sort of very specific question in the chat, then it stays here with us because it's part of this particular forum. But if you've entered it into the thought exchange, it certainly will be included in all of the information that is shared as part of the public feedback of this process. Or if it's a particular kind of question that generated a lot of discussion here tonight, we're going to convert it into an FAQ and post that to our website as well.
And to add, this is also being recorded, so it'll be in YouTube and linked on our website in case you do want to listen back to the Q&A. We have one more, Susan. The northern side of Fuquay is closer to Herbert Akins, so why is Willow Spring being moved when it's further away?
So let's look at the map while we answer that question. Pardon me, I'm trying not to make you dizzy and go too fast. So thank you. I believe that the participant may be referring to this portion here. Currently, that is aligned with Fuquay Varina Elementary, which is on the traditional calendar. And so where possible, we don't intentionally create a calendar misalignment. So we've left Fuquay Varina Elementary assigned to Fuquay Varina Middle for the time being. And that's why we're recommending the Willow Spring Elementary base because of the calendar alignment as well as the capacity availability. There were some questions that came up on the thought exchange and other discussions about recognizing that Willow Springs elementary students are also assigned to Willow Spring High School, and a concern that there aren't many students at Herbert Akins that also would feed to Willow Spring High School. And we have done some looking at that. There are students that go Banks Elementary, Herbert Akins Road Middle, Willow Spring High, and there are students who go Ballantyne Elementary, Herbert Akins Road Middle, and Willow Spring High. So there is a decent sized cohort coming out of Herbert Akins Road Middle that would be assigned to Willow Spring High School.
Let us know if you have any more questions.
Were there any other maps that needed a second look or any other data tables that anybody wanted to look at a second time?
Don't see anything yet coming in the chat. I will check thought exchange again.
And again, for those of you participating in the thought exchange, thank you so much for using that hashtag session3. It really does make it very easy for us to find those questions to make sure we answer them tonight.
If we are in a year-round and have a rising ninth grader, which is traditional calendar, do the younger siblings get moved to traditional schools?
Can we say that one more time?
We are in a year-round and we have a nice rising ninth grader who's going to traditional calendar. Do the younger siblings get moved to traditional schools? I think they want to align the calendars.
Yep, I got it. So we do not change the school assignment for your younger students based on the fact that the student is rising into high school. We recognize that because we use multi-track year-round calendars for families that have children across multiple grade spans, there can be some calendar misalignment that occurs. It's not our preference, but it is our reality just because of the way that we use the calendars to help with capacity and so forth. So usually what happens in that case is the family might choose to keep the younger students on their multi-track year-round calendars because they like the schools that they're at, they're familiar with the teachers, and they kind of make it work for that year or so that there's a bit of a calendar misalignment while the older student is in high school. Other families will actively ask to have their students changed to a traditional calendar middle or traditional calendar elementary school, citing that desire for calendar alignment. And if and when possible, by following policy guidelines and transfer rules, we'll try to approve those transfers where we can. We just have to be cautious not to promise that we will, because there always are some capacity situations that we have to keep in mind. In some parts of the district, it's very difficult to get true K-12 calendar alignment. It is a reality that we have to own.
2 more.
Okay.
Confirming with stability transfers. Apply this year for a rising junior, would hold through senior year, and it would not require submission again.
Correct. I like that one. That was easy.
Will the board be providing traffic control with Fuquay PD for the influx of traffic, carpool time caused by the removal of bus transportation?
So that's again, a little outside of my scope, because that deals a little bit more with some site management at the local level, as well as partnerships with municipalities and SROs. I don't have direct experience with how those decisions are made and when traffic management is provided by local police departments. Glenn, I'm not sure, do you have any knowledge of that process?
Generally, the local police department will come if there are traffic concerns to assist. But again, it's strictly voluntary. I mean, there's nothing that the school system is responsible for with regards to the number of students that carpool and managing that traffic.
I do know that our schools work very closely with their on-site teams to develop effective carpool strategies and to improve carpool lines, when necessary, and to make adjustments there, at least
Correct.
for the on-site piece.
Correct. That's how I understand it as well. If there tends to be a significant impact on the local community, I'm sure further conversations will be had with the local municipality.
And taking this as part of our feedback, we can certainly make sure we share this with all the parties involved, that there's already concerns that this might be an issue, so that they can be thinking about that as they prepare for the next school year.
Can the proposition to be rezoned to include houses within a mile of the school go to the school instead of being divided by a road?
If I understand the question correctly, it's, do we establish a certain zone that's closest to the school that we can say, because you're within this particular radius, you would be assigned to the school? Would that be an appropriate understanding of the question? Okay.
Yes.
So with each future and current plan, you didn't see here the recommendations we're making in the central region, but we're taking into consideration those types of things as well. The challenge we have, as was mentioned in the video and as I discussed earlier about development, is we cannot always guarantee that families will be able to go to the school that's closest to their homes, simply because our schools just aren't neatly located that way, because developments don't come up that way for us. But wherever possible, when the capacity supports it, when it matches our student achievement goals and so forth and so on, we are looking to identify any school sites where there might be a very proximate neighborhood that's not assigned to the school, and work to try to find a way to allow it to go to that closest school. But I have to stop short of making a promise that that's how it'll work, because particularly if you go to our downtown areas, there's lots of schools that are very, very close to each other. I could actually be equally close to 2 or 3 schools from where I live. And so we just have to be really cautious that we don't make a false promise. But certainly we absolutely work to identify areas where families might be able to walk to school, or where there might be their closest school. But in all cases, we can't promise that that'll always be true.
One clarification about stability rules, Susan.
Yes.
We only have to do the stability transfer one time while the child is in their current school until they finish that school. Example, second grader at South Lakes will only have to do the request one time until he graduates 5th.
Correct. And so the two sides of the coin on that, that means that that's the student school assignment through 5th grade. So if at some point you want something different, you want to go to your new base school because you want the transportation, or you want to apply for a magnet school or something like that, you would need to specifically put in that application and ask for that change. When we do a stability transfer, we do go ahead for a stability perspective and make it valid through that 5th grade or 8th or 12th, depending on the grade level of your student. We do that as a convenience. However, let's say you move across town, well, your assignment would still be South Lakes when you move. So you would just need to put in a quick transfer letting us know that you've moved to Wake Forest and you'd really now like to go to the school in the Wake Forest area instead. That's how solid that transfer is.
Let us know if you guys have any final questions. We have 7 minutes.
I believe Corelli, our host, has put my email address in the chat at some point. So if you do find that you have a really nuanced or detailed question, please feel free to email me directly. Again, put it in a thought exchange as well so that everybody sees it too. But please feel free to reach out to me directly and I'll do my best to answer any specific questions you might have about your own family situation.
I just added it again in case anyone missed it.
Thank you.
I am also adding the URL to our webpage with all of this information on our website. It's wcpss.net/2023 enrollment proposal, in case you want to look at anything else. Does anyone have any final questions? This change places a considerable hardship on some families, even with stability rules, but no transportation. Are there further steps that can be taken beyond this meeting, or are these actions solidified?
So we will continue to share these types of concerns. And obviously by putting them in the thought exchange, that means they get full public display and sharing with the board. Continue to participate. If you don't see the changes that you were hoping for in draft 2, there'll be another opportunity to comment and discuss things again during draft 2. And of course, there's always the public hearing for the board on November 10th. So there are ways to share your concerns, and we certainly understand them. They're not unseen to us. And as was sort of, again, going back to the video at the beginning, that balance between trying to address all the needs of the district as well as meeting needs of individual families. When it comes together and it works on both sides of that balance, it's wonderful. When it tips one way or the other, we do understand it. It's not always ideal. And so we're in a position where we don't want to overpromise. We don't want to say that we can do things that maybe we can't. For example, adding transportation for 8th graders or something. We don't want to mislead you and tell you that those are things that potentially could happen. That's not to say we won't ask for them, but we don't want to mislead you.
Any final questions? So my future 6th grader can go to Fuquay Middle with his sister next year for 8th grader. He can then stay at Fuquay Middle until he graduates 8th. But then I can request for my future son to go to 6th grade with him.
So the stability rules, that's a very good question. The stability rules are specific to the coming school year. So as we move forward, future students who might be coming into the 6th grade in years that follow 24, 25, 25, 26, they'll be subject to whatever stability rules are available at that time. So I can't make the promise that the youngest student would be able to join in a future year, but the stability rule would allow the current student and the current rising 6th grader to be able to be together. So I do need to be careful to note that we can't always promise that many years out that the rules would still be the same.
Can I just add something? I think that falls under the transfer process. So they would make a transfer request. And so if you if you have a child that's already attending the school
Okay.
and
Yes.
you have a rising sixth grader who's trying to attend the same school, under the current policy, student assignment will grant those transfers.
Unless the school's capped. Well, we've got to talk
Yeah,
through that.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
so what Mr. Cruz is talking about is there's two different types of transfers in our district, and we don't want to be real bureaucratic here, but the stability transfers is a particular special set aside time just for families impacted by the coming assignment plan. And so that's where you'll access the stability rules for anybody who's being impacted going into the 23-24 school year. Other than that, we always have a regular official transfer window that's usually toward the end of February, goes a little bit into March. And so in future years, you would want to use that other transfer period to make that request to have your siblings at the same school. And yes, Mr. Carrozza is right. By policy, we do everything we can to let siblings be at the same school. It's just by that time, it won't be quote unquote stability because it won't be part of that year's assignment plan, but it would still be part of our normal transfer rules that say wherever possible, we try to allow siblings to attend the same school together. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Crozza.
We have one final question. How does removing board-approved transportation alleviate attendance if parents provide transportation?
Excellent question. And so what we're looking at here is, again, as I mentioned toward the beginning, because new schools aren't involved, there is a percentage of families that will take, believe it or not, there's some families that are excited about the school change. So there is a percentage of families we've seen historically that will attend the new school. In addition, the Rising Kindergarten group will attend the new school or the new base school for their area. And so in the first year, it'll provide that needed relief to get us through 23-24. And then as the years progress, that relief will come throughout the other grades as they age forward. But that is an excellent question. But we do know that there's a certain percentage of families that will go ahead and accept the new assignment and take it. And that provides that relief as well as those incoming kindergartners. And in your area in particular, new residents who move in after the assignment plan has approved, they're not part of the stability rules, so they would also be going to this new school for the address.
There's one final question. How can we find this meeting on YouTube? Is it listed on WCPSS? And I can answer that. We have our YouTube channel is under Wake County Schools. After this meeting, the video will download and in the morning it'll be ready. I will post it and upload it onto YouTube. So you should see it in the morning. And then I will post it on our 2023 enrollment proposal webpage. I think that's it, Susan.
Again, thank you all so much for participating. If you have another thought later tonight or tomorrow or the next day, please post that to the thought exchange. If you have a very specific question that's nuanced to your family, by all means, reach out to me via email. And again, thank you so much for your robust participation. I thought this was a really good session. I feel hopefully we clarified a lot of elements and at least gave you the why behind the recommendations.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.